You are listening to the only healthcare podcast created to inform you on the whys, hows, and what's of healthcare. Hosted by industry leaders Michael Navin and Dr. Randy Bogenberg, discussing why cost and risk are so high and who should be held accountable. How will technological advancements merge with the quality of care? And when does the public gain access to advanced medical treatments? Listen in as Michael and Randy answer industry concerns for the public and all stakeholders involved.
Welcome back to another episode of the Only Healthcare Podcast. Today, we are diving into the evolving world of PBM reform and the significant role of biosimilars in healthcare. We are thrilled to have Stan Mehr with us, who's an expert in the biosimilar space, and he can shed light on these topics. Stan is renowned for his deep insight into healthcare policy and has contributed extensively to the understanding of market dynamics in the biosimilar sector. Let's get ready to unravel the complexities of healthcare reform and what it means for stakeholders across the board. Welcome, Stan, and Randy, take it away.
Thanks, Michael. And it's great to have Stan, who's a collaborator with both of us over the years. He's got several decades of experience in the pharmaceutical industry, focusing on healthcare reform as well as biosimilars. He currently serves as a consultant and provides strategic advice on healthcare marketing dynamic, commercialization strategies, and regulatory frameworks. He's noted for his in-depth analysis, as Michael mentioned, and has been instrumental in shaping policy discussions around biosimilars, as well as pharmaceutical reforms. We are seeing a changing market right now in the United States, not only because of the presidential election, but because of the R&D pipeline, which also contributed to the development of the biosimilar medications, which we'll be talking about today. For employers listening, it's been a difficult time, both from a financial perspective, but also from really having a good understanding on how to best leverage and optimize the use of biosimilars in their pharmacy benefits, as well as in some of the uses through the medical benefit. So there's a real opportunity that we'd like to explore today in our conversations around, well, what could be done differently? How can manufacturers collaborate more effectively with the employer plan sponsors and others? And as we get more biosimilar options, assuming the pharmaceutical biosimilar manufacturers can continue their growth, how that's going to change the marketplace, what are some of the opportunities, and how employers can get more engaged with their benefit administration vendors, as well as potential collaborations with manufacturers. So to start off with, let's understand this landscape. We know that biosimilars have been around now for more than a decade. They were slow to start. They're still struggling a little bit, but now we have more patent expirations. So Stan, can you give us kind of the state of the marketplace right now? We're in biosimilars. Where do they fit in?
Well, thank you, Randy and Michael, for inviting me, first of all, to be part of the Only Healthcare Podcast. I'd love to talk about the environment. So right now, we just had another biosimilar approval just yesterday, in fact, and that brings us to something in the order of 60 biosimilars now being approved by the FDA. And as you know, biosimilars, the name of the game in biosimilars is reducing the cost of expensive specialty medications. That's the whole reason for biosimilars' existence and for biosimilar competition. And right now, there are several manufacturers who are leading the pack in the way of producing biosimilars, some of them in the U.S., some of them are out of Korean manufacturers, for instance, such as Samsung Bioepis and Celltrion, and some are Amgen in the U.S., and they really go across several drug categories, including oncology categories, as well as now the immunology categories, such as adalimumab, which is Humira, ustekinumab, which is Stelara, which has just been launched in January of 2025 as a biosimilar. So this is all, in terms of the immunology category, it's relatively recent. We've seen tremendous cost savings because of the existence of biosimilar competition on the oncology and the immunology side to the tune of over $25 billion so far, I believe at this point, approximately, cumulatively over the course of time since the first biosimilar introduction back in 2015. Now, that cost savings is going to continue to escalate rather rapidly with these immunology monoclonal antibodies that are all going off patent and that are being more and more introduced or launched as biosimilars today. We've got a lot of reason for optimism. We've got reason for cautious optimism because on the immunology side, especially, we have pharmacy benefit covered biosimilars that are really having a huge impact on cost savings. And this is where the PBMs really come in. The first biosimilar that the PBMs really control and manage is really adalimumab, the Humira biosimilar. And that particular one launched in January of 2023, immediately saved something like, with at least some formulation, something on the order of 80 to 85% off of the list price of Humira very soon after launch. And that really has cascaded with up to about 11 different or 12 different biosimilar manufacturers launching a Humira biosimilar and offering similar cost savings. However, it has not been all smooth sailing.
This obviously brings up, where does PBM reform fit into all this? What was started under the Biden administration, what the Trump administration is talking about. So at kind of a baseline level, just to fill in the blanks for those that may not be as aware, employers utilize third-party administrators, pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs. So what is the role of these PBMs and how are they affecting, in general, drug pricing and access to the pharmaceuticals, biopharmaceuticals, and biosimilars?
Well, across all product lines, commercial, Medicare, and Medicaid, the big three PBMs, that is OptumRx, CVS Caremark, and Express Scripts, they control 80% of all prescriptions written in the country. Now, by controlling and managing, that means for your audience simply that they have a say over what gets covered or what doesn't get covered. And the employers have a say too. Whether they exercise that say is a different story, but they control what's covered, how easy it is to access or to get that prescription for that particular product, because there might be a step therapy, there might be prior authorization criteria that need to be filled. So the PBMs have almost an oversized role in terms of managing access to those prescriptions, to those biologics, which are high-cost specialty products, and now to the biosimilars as well. So for instance, if the PBM decides that they're going to put a biosimilar of Humira on formulary and just one or two, that means that the other manufacturers for those biosimilars will not get coverage or may not get preferred coverage for that particular population of patients managed by that PBM.
Can I ask? So I just wanted to ask something about the really the process. So Stan, you mentioned having the significant cost savings, which is great. But these brands still exist as brands. So why are there still brands on the market in that form? And then is there a clinical rationale or is there also a financial rationale why the brand still exists?
You're talking about the reference products or the originators?
Yeah. Reference products.
Yeah. So the brand or we refer to them as the reference products or the originator products. They specifically exist for a number of different reasons. On the pharmacy benefit side specifically, there's rebates that are involved that the PBMs get from the manufacturers and that are either kept by the PBM, shared by the PBM with the employer or the plan, the health plans that they service, or maybe send fully back to the employer if they're a full transfer, a full pass-through PBM, which is a little unusual. But the PBM, this is, and the rebates and the transparency around the rebates are the main driving factors for why there is such talk about PBM reform today. And, well, I shouldn't say today and in the last 10 years.
So you talked about the financial side of it, but is there a clinical value proposition for the reference product to still be available?
As long as they're available, they're still going to be probably the preferred product or one of the preferred products. They're still going to get, a lion's share of the utilization while everybody starts switching over slowly to the biosimilars. For an example, if you think about the oncology products on the medical benefit, like Herceptin, it has taken about 3 to 4 years for Herceptin to be the market share of Herceptin to be overtaken by all the biosimilars that were available. I believe there were 5 or 6 at the time. So in those 3 years, the reference manufacturer still has an opportunity to gain quite a bit of revenue, for their product and into the future too. Because what happens then, Mike, is the reference product manufacturer will then be much more keen on competing with the biosimilars. They too will drop their price. So they'll become one of the players on the marketplace and still be able to, with some of these product categories, bring in quite a bit of revenue for their company.
Are there any ones that are doing parity pricing to the biosimilar, or are they always going to have a rebate attached to the reference product?
I think they'll probably because they do what they call dual pricing, in which case there's a high WAC price, a wholesale acquisition cost, a low wholesale acquisition cost option, so that if a PBM or a plan sponsor or an employer wants to still maintain those rebates and those high rebate numbers, they can go with a high WAC cost, which means that there's only a slight discount, maybe 5% discount off of the original list price, but the manufacturer still provides a hefty rebate back to the PBM, who then shares it back with the plan or the employer sponsor. You can get a low WAC discount, on the other hand, which means that there's a very high discount. It could be 80% off of the WAC price, and there might be no rebate or a very small rebate attached to that. So you have the opportunity as a PBM to contract for either one of those offerings. And the manufacturer will offer either one very happily because this net price is going to be about the same. So whatever happens, the manufacturer is saying, well, we're still in the game. That works for us. Whatever works for you is best for us.
So that becomes an important talking point with employers or other plan sponsors who are offering an insurance product or pharmacy benefit to perhaps leverage these biosimilars to more effectively have a competitive benefit plan for their members, the patients. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They can certainly take a much stronger role in terms of deciding, well, do they want that big rebate or do they want the biosimilar savings? Because even when you get down into the weeds, if you have a biosimilar and a reference product that are supposedly at parity pricing, the biosimilar is generally going to still be a little less costly. It just works out that way.
So this really highlights the critical nature of transparent decision-making and contracting in particular with PBMs. It's something that we've been talking about in some of the other episodes. So employers really need to pay attention in their contracting and be thinking about their decision-making, particularly as it relates to biosimilars, because we're in general talking about higher cost products than the typical generic brands that we used to deal with in the pharmacy benefit. So one of the questions I have is kind of leading into a couple other areas we want to explore is the impact of the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, and how that kind of impacts or changes the pricing scenario for biosimilar reimbursement.
Right.
Can you talk about that?
Yes. Now, when we're talking about things related to the Inflation Reduction Act and its impact on the biosimilar industry, we're always talking about a few years ahead. So decisions being made by the IRA or CMS today is going to affect biosimilar development for the future. Generally doesn't affect immediate biosimilars, except if you're talking about the Part D redesign. I don't know if you want to get into that specifically, Randy.
Yeah, not right now.
Yeah, because it gets a little convoluted. Yeah. But when you're talking about the IRA and biosimilars, what the Medicare price negotiation is generally doing is they're setting a price of a reference price. Well, I shouldn't say reference again. They're setting a negotiated price for a biologic that's a high cost to Medicare. They're setting that price that's going to take effect in, say, 2 or 3 years' time for a specific biologic. Now, if you're working on a biosimilar candidate for that product and you're working in the development stage, you're thinking about, okay, what am I, first of all, my revenue opportunity here and what the savings might be when my product finally makes it to the market. Once the Medicare price negotiated, the price that is negotiated by CMS with the manufacturer is announced, that means that it's going to be far lower than your original price when you started developing the product, the biosimilar product. So your revenue opportunity is going to be lower to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And IRA, of course, is supposed to be specific to Medicare. But we know that the way payers and PBMs approach pricing, they may see the Medicare as a threshold price for when the biosimilar first comes on the market. And they say, okay, well, what's going to be our discount below that Medicare negotiated price? Mm-hmm. So for commercial, and even, well, Medicaid's probably going to be lower anyway, but certainly for commercial, that's going to be a lower revenue opportunity than the biosimilar manufacturer had actually thought 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. So in that respect, it's a very obvious and straightforward detriment to biosimilar development. Mm-hmm. And you may even decide that, okay, well, I know I was going to be 7 competitors coming onto the market. I know Medicare is going to negotiate a lower price for that product than I originally anticipated. Maybe I'm going to stop development of that product. Right. And it's going to shrink competition for that drug category. 3 years from now, when the patent expiration occurs and the drug could come onto market, assuming you receive FDA approval. And then essentially the payers and the PBMs will lose the opportunity for that additional cost savings from the biosimilars. So it's a very serious concern right now that all biosimilar manufacturers are looking very hard at. The folks I've spoken to, they've already taken a hard look at maybe starting to pare back their biosimilar pipelines based on the IRA and the IRA Medicare price negotiation.
So clearly there's a lot of challenges, yet there's still opportunities with biosimilars.
Yes.
What I'm hearing, particularly from a kind of commercial perspective, you're probably going to see a decrease in rebate dollars available, although there may be some options potentially. But IRA is really closing that opportunity around rebates continuing the way they had in the past. So employers need to be aware of that, be thinking about that. And at the same time, we know PBMs aren't sitting still. The third-party administrators are going to be looking at this as, okay, if I'm going to lose revenue potential as well off these rebates and what I don't disclose due to my contracting practices, I'm going to be looking for other opportunities to make money.
Yep.
So again, as you said, aside from Medicaid, which gets the most favored nation price, commercial and Medicare has some linkages that commercial needs to be aware of in terms of what the impact could be, particularly on these biosimilar manufacturers. So where is leading the PBMs to go, Stan? What are you seeing PBMs doing?
So the question is this a natural evolution or is this a way to replace revenue? And that's what leads us to this new aspect of private labeling of biosimilars and drugs competing in this specialty pharmaceutical space. So starting in April of 2024, CVS Health introduced the distributor earlier, but they introduced a biosimilar form of adalimumab that month under a distributor called Cordavis that is owned by CVS Health and Evernorth. No, excuse me, not Evernorth. It's CVS and So Cordavis introduced their own product, which is a private label brand of a Sandoz biosimilar called Hyrimoz. They started offering that product at the same WAC discount offered by Sandoz and the other manufacturers, about 80% off of WAC, for this private label Cordavis brand. And in addition, they also started offering a private label version of Humira, which was an unbranded version that AbbVie, the reference manufacturer, made available to Cordavis at an 80% discount. So immediately thereafter, they excluded the originator product, Humira, from formulary and offered these products: Cordavis's private label brand, Cordavis's Humira unbranded version, and Sandoz's branded Hyrimoz at the high WAC version. The Cordavis brand immediately grabbed a bunch of market share. I think it rose to about 12% of total market share for the adalimumab category within 5 weeks. I think over the summer, I did an interview with the CVS Health senior vice president there, Josh Friedel, and he said that they converted 97% of all of their adalimumab usage to the Cordavis or Humira brands, the biosimilars.
Wow.
Now that sounds like a lot, but overall, it didn't translate to a lot of biosimilar conversion for the entire marketplace. So if I can back up to December of 2023, at that time, the biosimilars only had a 2% market share cumulatively between 10 competitors. That meant Humira had 98%. By April and May of 2024, that number shrunk to about 80% for Humira and 20% cumulatively for all the biosimilars, with the vast majority being the Cordavis brands. The problem was that after that, it sort of flatlined. There was no further uptake, despite the fact that ESI, Express Scripts, started their own distributor and their own private labeling of an adalimumab biosimilar, which was then followed by OptumRx and Nuvala, their own distributor for specialty pharmaceuticals, who introduced their own adalimumab. So the latest figures, which are available as of November 2024, was that there still remains, I think Humira still has 78 or 79% total market share, the originator brand, and the biosimilars cumulatively have 21 or 22% market share, still dominated by Cordavis's brand. What's happened is the PBMs who are marketing these private branded biosimilars are receiving revenue as what I call them pseudo manufacturers as part of the spread price that they now share with Sandoz. After they get that discount, that 80% discount, part of that revenue goes to Sandoz and part of that revenue goes to Cordavis and goes back to the PBM, which is used to replace the rebate revenues that they're losing. That's what the other PBMs are expecting will happen. They're going to gain revenue through manufacturing of the biosimilars to replace the rebate revenue that they've seen in the past.
So from a Federal Trade Commission perspective and competitive landscape, how is that fair to the consumer or the employer, right? How is it fair that the PBM, who's really there to deliver, a benefit, is now making a product that they're forcing you to take?
Very good point, Mike. There is certainly conflicts of interest here that have to be looked at and looked at very carefully. And quite frankly, if you're the employer and your pharmacy benefit is being serviced by one of these PBMs who offer the private labels, you have to be aware of it, aware of the conflict, and understand that you may not be getting the best deal from these private labels, despite the fact you're getting a nice savings overall from biosimilars, but you may not be optimizing it.
And the problem with that is an employer is not looking at that level of detail, right?
Correct. Correct. 90% of employers, I think, are basically relying on their PBMs to administrate that pharmacy benefit and manage it for them, or the benefit consultants.
Yeah.
And, they've got to, at this point, be made aware of it. I know there's certain organizations, coalitions that are trying to get the word out, like the National Alliance, folks like that, and folks like Randy's organization. But I think it's imperative right now that people understand, and the FTC starts taking a close look at these arrangements and what it means for competitiveness for the biosimilar industry itself. Because quite frankly, if you don't have an arrangement with the big three, at least one of the big three PBMs on these pharmacy benefit covered biosimilars, your pathway to revenue success or sustainability is very limited. And it might get more limited in the future.
I mean, you've already seen companies abandon their own programs.
Yes. Companies like Coherus has already sold their adalimumab franchise. There's going to be others who are seeing presently very, very minor revenue coming in and reporting it on their quarterly reports and their annual reports. How much longer will their shareholders, want them to be in this area and not taking advantage of a new biologic that they should be investigating in stealth, an innovative product? It becomes a very difficult situation, to the point at which we have to be philosophically very aware that the biosimilar competitiveness that has brought down the price of adalimumab by so much, and it's going to bring down the price of Stelara by so much, and Opdivo and Keytruda and these other major high-cost biologics, you may be losing or at risk of losing this opportunity in the very near future.
Yeah. Whether we're looking at the Medicare price negotiation that you talked about earlier, creating unintended consequences, what you just described with the white label is creating some unintended consequences for the self-insured employer. It's also creating a potential liability for the employer plans because of their fiduciary responsibility, which is something that many organizations have been talking about for a while now. And there's a lot of consumer advocacy groups that are beginning to look at this area, biosimilars, because the biologic products in general is now becoming the major category driver in the pharmacy benefit and in some cases the medical benefit.
No, that's correct, Randy. And if you think about it, this goes back really to high rebates, because what had happened was that when you've got a product that's got a very high price and you get a high rebate to sort of equal a lower net price or net cost for the PBM or the plan sponsor or the employer, the rebates are getting filtered through those levels. So the employer or the end purchaser, if you will, the ultimate purchaser, is not receiving the ultimate savings. That savings is being received by the PBM, and just means that, okay, the employer is not fulfilling that fiduciary responsibility, whether they realize it or not, because they're not getting the savings they should be getting.
What are your long-term projections or predictions of what's going to happen, since you're talking about maybe a 3 to 5 year time frame for all this to play out? Where do you see this all ending up?
Well, I think historically for the biosimilars, we've got 10 years under our belt with biosimilar history right now. We know it takes literally at least 3 biosimilar competitors to get the price down from the originator product or the reference product down to where you're seeing really large cuts, large savings. Now, we need to maintain having 3 biosimilar competitors in every one of these categories or more to maintain those large savings. Or you won't see the original price cuts, or in some of the other categories that lose competitors, prices will start rising again. So it's going to end up being a situation where who's going to be the biosimilar manufacturers of the future? Will it be companies unlike an Amgen or a Pfizer or a Boehringer Ingelheim, companies that can accept lower revenues and still feel like they want to be part of the game? Or will it be generic companies? If they receive $50 million per year in revenue on a biosimilar and have a very large portfolio of other products, well, that sort of fits in with their whole philosophy and strategy. They can do that and they could survive on it. But other companies, other large traditional biotech companies, won't stay in that game for very long at all. And unless they are major global players and they're receiving revenue from other countries, the US isn't going to be their dominant market anymore.
Have you seen any leadership from the manufacturers taking this on?
From the major biotech companies?
Yeah.
No.
C-suite level.
I have not personally. I mean, Amgen probably has been at the forefront because they were one of the first and established, along with Sandoz. But Sandoz was part of Novartis for many, at that time, and they've only spun off for recently. And Sandoz now is a very, very dedicated biosimilar player. But Amgen has been all along. They've been, straggling right along that line of a reference manufacturer and a biosimilar manufacturer for many years. And they've done fairly well globally, especially in the EU on the biosimilar side, as well as trying their best to make as much revenue as possible on the US side.
Randy and I were talking on a different podcast, and we talked about the agreements that are in place between the employers and the PBMs and the manufacturers and the PBMs. And not only have you brought to light some really interesting information around, the distribution and how they're going to own the manufacturing. When you look at their contracting, it's almost like they prohibit any direct work. If a manufacturer wanted to work directly with a large self-funded employer to carve out these specific patients, there's all kinds of poison pen clauses in those agreements that prevent that from happening and vice versa. And it's really a crazy anti-competitive and does not promote, a fair and open marketplace. And they're locking in these, fact that they're going to manufacture these drugs. So again, has there been any discussion in your world about those issues? And
well, I think more the discussion occurs rather not on the pharmaceutical manufacturing side, Michael, but on the payer side. Payers such as Kaiser, who also actually own that huge health system, they jumped on the biosimilar bandwagon from day one because they recognize they don't go in for rebates. They're just looking for the lowest net cost, and they get it. They get it big time. More recently, Blue Shield of California, a very large commercial and Medicare player in California, they're going to direct contracting now with the manufacturers. They're essentially moving the PBMs back to the PBM's original role in that you created a pharmacy network for us. Terrific. That's your role now. You're going to manage that pharmacy network. You're not managing our pharmacy benefits anymore. We're doing it.
That's a good first step. So then they're basically taking that approach of direct net pricing for the manufacturer, no games, bringing that to their customers and saying, work with our health plan so we can get you.
Exactly. I mean, there are strong associations on the biosimilar side, as you'd imagine. There's the Biosimilar Council, which is an arm of the Association of Accessible Medicines with the Generic Manufacturers, or the Generic Manufacturers Association. And there's also a separate group called the Biosimilar Forum. That's another group of biosimilar manufacturers, and they advocate for the industry, but only so much they can do themselves. They're mostly, pushing out the education as fast as they can and making people aware of these issues, such as the IRA's effect on biosimilar development, for instance. It's an issue that I don't think one biosimilar player can lead on themselves at this point in time. I think the evolution of the PBM and the drug channel is sort of outpacing their ability to counteract it or address it sufficiently so that they can make sure that their future is assured and the biosimilar future is assured.
That's a great opportunity for the employer to really re-engage in this area and start paying more attention to where this is all going, because they can have an outsized influence and an opportunity as well for collaboration with manufacturers. So with that, I want to thank you, Stan. This has been awesome. Love these insights, and thank you to our listeners who are joining us on this important discussion about PBM reform and biosimilars. These topics are crucial for understanding the future of healthcare costs and access. And we hope today's episode helps clarify the significant roles these elements play in our healthcare system. Remember to share this podcast with your peers and colleagues and spread this knowledge. Join us next time as we continue to explore the policies and innovations that shape our healthcare landscape.
Thank you for tuning in to the Only Healthcare podcast. We hope you found today's episode insightful and informative. Remember, our mission is to provide actionable and inspirational insights on how we can improve healthcare cost, care, and accessibility for all. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and share with your friends and family. For more resources and updates, visit us at onlyhealthcarepodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what topics you'd like us to discuss in future episodes. Until next time, stay informed, and together, let's navigate the journey to better healthcare.